And
this meeting is being recorded.
So for today's presentation, I'm happy to introduce Christine Hughes, a leading volunteer supporting the Pollinator Garden at Windermere United Church in Toronto. Her presentation will be 20 minutes or so, and then there'll be time for questions and answers. As the host of today's session, I will moderate the questions, but if anyone participating on the webinar has any questions they'd like to ask, please feel free to put them in the chat, or else following the presentation, you can unmute yourself and ask the question that way. Finally, I'd like to mention that this webinar series and other soil programs are made possible by the generous and ongoing support of Gaia College, Canada's leading college for courses in organic land care. So with that, over to you, Christine.
Great, thank you very much. And I'd like to first thank Soul for inviting me to present on our pollinator garden today, and also for recognizing our garden as a greener green space in 2021. That was kind of an exciting thing for our small garden. So what I can do is I'll kind of walk you through, give you a bit of a visual tour of our garden through some photos, talk about how we got started, what we were trying to do with it. And I'll finish up with a few sort of challenges and successes that we've encountered along the way. So I'll just start here. So as mentioned, this garden is located at Windermere United Church in the city of Toronto, which is in the west end of Toronto. Over the last few years, actually, the City of Toronto has done a number of initiatives which were promoting pollinators and pollinator gardens. And I've just noted a few things here, but in April 2016, the City Council adopted a resolution designating Toronto a bee city, and we became the first such bee city in Canada. And then in April 2018, they adopted a pollinator protection strategy. And the vision was to make Toronto home to diverse pollinator communities that contribute to resilient ecosystems and enhance urban biodiversity. And, so the strategy outlines a lot of different things that the city is doing or will be doing. And one of them was the introduction of PollinateTO community grant program, which they introduced in 2019. And you could apply for a grant of up to $5,000 to support community-led projects that would create pollinator habitat in Toronto. And I had been volunteering for about probably 8 or 9 years before that at a different garden at another church, where they were using all of their land they had to grow vegetables and herbs. And then these were donated to programs, organizations and programs, whether it's food banks or nonprofits in a part of Toronto where there are a lot of food insecure people. So when I saw how they were making such good use of their garden space, I thought, vegetable, we didn't really have the space or the right type of setting for growing vegetables, but I thought, why don't we try something to support pollinators? So I applied for the grant, and we were one of 35 projects that were approved in that first year. So here, this kind of shows you where we started. And I should say, because of COVID, we didn't actually get to start our garden in 2020, which was the original plan. So things were delayed until last year. And so our church is located on a pretty busy street on one side, and that's the side where you see the sign. That's Windermere Avenue. And then the other photo is showing you the side view. We're sort of on the corner of Windermere Avenue and Mayfield. And the church is it's not a very large congregation, but the church is used very heavily throughout the week. There's a daycare, a dance school, and people offering music lessons. And there's another Portuguese congregation that uses it. So it's very busy in terms of the building, and people actually don't go in and out the main doors other than maybe on Sunday, but there's some side doors over on the Mayfield Avenue where people go in and out. So you can see when before we did anything, there's just sort of patchy grass. There was, a little bit of things that have been there, leftovers, like a lot of daylilies, some hostas. And then over here, there was kind of a scrubby little hedge of some sort. There was a metal fence that really served no purpose, and it was sort of falling apart. And then over here, this brown box, electrical box, those were something to do with Bell. So there wasn't a lot in terms of anything that would be kind of attracting bees or other insects and butterflies to our garden. So we wanted to change that. And this was a little cartoon I saw this year in the New Yorker magazine. And when I saw it, I thought, well, this is kind of like what we were trying to do when we started. So, looking for birds, bats, moths, butterflies, and bees. So that was kind of us as we started out with our project. So the objectives really were, these are 4 main ones that I've identified, but first was to create new pollinator gardens and expand existing garden beds by adding native pollinator-friendly plants. We didn't really have any of those to begin with. And then we wanted to try and establish different habitats based on the soil, sun, and water conditions. And we've basically set up 3 habitats now. There's a woodland garden, a rain garden, and what we just call meadowland, but it's just kind of the sunnier parts of the garden. The grant requires us to have a bit of an educational component to inform others about pollinator stewardship. And we've tried to do a number of events so far, and we'll be continuing with that in the future. And then this one probably shouldn't be last on the list, but we wanted to involve the community. So not only the congregants and adherents of Windermere United Church, but neighbors on the street, the children and parents who attend the daycare and the dance school, and anyone else who was interested. So that's what we were trying to accomplish. And so in the next few slides, I'm just going to go over a bit of how we actually created our pollinator habitat. And if you are like from a smaller, or if you're trying to maybe just do something in your own backyard, or maybe a smaller garden at a school or a faith community, these are kind of things that would be helpful for you to keep into account. So the first thing is to provide food sources. And so what we've done is obviously plant native plants, and more than 75% of our plants, trees, and shrubs are now native species. And there are some non-native plants that kind of predated our initiative, but they're all non-invasive species, with maybe the exception, I think, the daylilies, some people say are invasive, but we've pulled out a lot of them. We just have a little spot where there's a couple there. We've also planted host plants. So there's several kinds of larval host plants that we've put in, including we have 3 different species of native milkweed that the monarch butterflies will be attracted to. Golden Alexander is another example for the black swallowtail. And then we also made a concerted effort to make sure that we're providing continuous bloom. So there will be plants that bloom in the spring, some start blooming in the summer, and then we have our fall ones, primarily. We have a number of types of goldenrod and asters. Those are, I think, the main fall ones. But so just making sure that there's always something there for the pollinators. And we've tried as well to plant different types of plants, but in groupings, so that it's easier for the pollinators to find and collect the pollen and nectar. If some of them like a certain type of plant, if we have like them grouped together, it's a bit easier. And we've just made sure to use single bloom varieties Since I understand that if you use the double or triple bloom, sometimes that will block access to pollen and nectar for the insects. And the second thing is providing nesting sites. So we've, in our woodland garden, we've got some bare patches of soil that we've left. And actually I was there earlier in the week, earlier in the morning, and it was really interesting because I was looking at that garden, and we haven't had the best luck of growing things there, but I was just looking just above the ground. It was swarming with all different kinds of bees. So I guess that part is working. They may be having their nests there. And just in terms of mulch, we did get 2 big loads last year of wood chips from an arborist at different times of the year, but we've tried to make sure part of it was to we were trying to kill the grass, some of the grass that we still had. So we were using it for that. But in terms of in the actual garden beds, we were a bit careful with where we put the mulch, just so that we're not like covering all the spaces for insects. And we've also incorporated large branches and decaying logs into our gardens in different spots. And this could provide spots for birds and nesting locations for bees as well. And we've sort of used, not really, they're not logs, but like big long branches to kind of help define our garden. And there might be, I think there'll be some photos that you'll see that later on. And another thing we do is to make sure that any dead stems last year that we had in the fall are, we left them this year until sort of mid-May in case there were any overwintering bees there. And then just we left the cut stems in the garden to decompose. Something that we did differently last year, previous to that, we have a couple of big trees on the church property, and there'd always be a lot of leaves in the fall. And in the past, they were always raked up and put out, for yard waste. And so last year, we said we're not doing that, and we raked the leaves up onto the garden. It seemed like they pretty well broke down over the winter. So we'll just continue doing that this year. And then we really, we don't till the ground at all. We want to make sure that any nesting sites are not disturbed. And so another thing would be important to include in your garden is some source of water, whether we've put in a small bird bath, but you can use like shallow clay kind of pots or something that's not too deep. And then we've also put some sort of sunny, made some sunny spots for any butterflies, and we've added bee hotels, and somebody donated a bird house, I guess it was in the spring. And finally, we don't use any pesticides in our gardens at all. So and it seems like we haven't needed to, so that's worked out. So these next couple of slides are going to show just what the difference 1 year, like so in June 2021 we started planting our garden, and so you'll see the picture on the left is what it looked like when we were putting them in, just kind of small. And I think that's the one thing with native plants is don't be discouraged by in the first year when you plant them, because sometimes they don't bloom, or maybe they're not as showy as sometimes people in our church, although we got a very positive reaction with what we have done, but the annuals that we used to have, like, sometimes are more colorful, but these last year they weren't. But then you'll see in the picture on the right that this year things came back, and there was more of them, and so it's been really a nice colorful garden so far. And again, here's another picture, and these are actually taken kind of at the same spot a year later, so you can compare. And the purple cone flowers were it was one of the activities we did with some of the kids in the church. Somebody delivered seeds to different households of the coneflower, and also borage, which I know is not native, but is native to Syria. And we'd supported some Syrian refugees when they were all coming over. So I thought, and bees really do love borage. So I thought it would be nice. And they were two seeds that they could grow at home. Like, they didn't require any extra effort. So these coneflowers are all ones that were from ones that children started last year. And then this is showing you, actually what this showed me when I was looking at this, when we were looking at the garden in the spring, is we realized when we sort of, when we put these beds in, we just made everything like a straight line across. So it wasn't very interesting. And when I looked at other gardens, I noticed, they were, had more of a design to it. So this year in the spring, we got 4 cubic yards of soil, and we pulled out the beds a bit more from the wall, like extended them. And we, gave them a bit more of a wavy design. And because the other problem is when we put everything like the way it looks in this picture, you can't really see it from the photo, but there's an overhang on the roof. So even when it rains, you don't really get it doesn't really rain on the plants when they were like this. So now that we've got them coming out a bit further, it's a bit better in terms of the water. And somebody donated a water barrel to us, which you can see back here by the garden shed. And so that's really nice too, because we like to use the rainwater as well when we're watering things. And so this was really interesting. And I meant to look today before, and I forgot to see whether this is a program across Canada or not. Or if it's just in Toronto. I suspect it's probably across Canada. So I think in that one of the first photos I showed you, these were these boxes that were just painted brown, and it's just not very attractive. And so I heard, like, the City of Toronto has an art program where they will paint, like have artists to paint. I guess I'm not sure what they're for, hydro boxes or something. But when I looked into it and sent them the photos, these are from Bell Canada. So they said they can't paint those, but that Bell had a program. So I talked to the person in 2020 about it, and he said, yeah, he could put our name on the list, but it wouldn't get painted until 2021. So last spring, a young artist from Hamilton actually came and painted, and you'll see the results over here. So she did a beautiful job of painting pollinator scenes, and she's painted a different image on all sides and the front and the back. And she looked at what we were growing in our garden, and she's tried to portray those plants. And this one you can see has the monarch butterflies, and then on some of the other side, though, there's some bumblebees as well. So she's done a really nice job. And so this was finished. Well, she didn't come. I think it was really kind of finished in June of 2021. So this really made it a nice difference. And everyone going to the church and walking by really provided positive comments on that. And here's just another picture just showing, the bee hotels. This was a butterfly box that somebody in the church donated. And then here's the bird box that somebody, I don't even know who gave us, that he made it. And then there's our bird bath. And this is our rain garden. So there's this white pipe is where the water drains out. So last year we started putting in some native grasses, and this is a big evening primrose that was really tiny when we planted it last year, and now it's quite large. So that's one of the things. And then this is just another part of the Meadowland garden. And so these are the habitats. So here's what I call the Meadowland. There's the rain garden, just a different view. we have some red cardinal flowers that we planted last year, and they're actually blooming this year, look really nice. And then our woodland garden, I didn't really have a good picture of it really, but this just shows you the part about the logs. And so we have ferns and, other plants like that. And then this is the front of the church on the Windermere side. So we're a little bit restricted here because we do have this sign, and there on each side of it, there's always a message that we want people to see. And last year I made the mistake of planting mammoth sunflowers around the edge of the garden, and they grew so tall that people couldn't see the sign. So I wasn't too popular, I guess, with a few people about that. So I planted them in a different location this year against the wall, and they still look nice. So I mentioned we were trying to do some educational activities. So, we had the kids starting the seeds and then coming to plant them in June. We did a really fun event last year during Pollinator week, where we timed it when the kids were being picked up by their parents from the daycare. So we had a table set outside, and we had rocks for them to paint, and there was adults that came, people from the church and neighbors, and then we had tours of the garden. And we also had an event in the fall with one of the women who volunteers with me. She still belongs to this group called Moms on Bloor, and they I think that started when their kids were little, but now they're in university or older. But they came in the fall and had a tour of the garden, and we had a really good discussion because a lot of them were interested in native plants and what they could do. So that was interesting. And we've had last fall we had sort of a cleanup day, and we did it after church, so pretty well everyone stayed and helped with that. And in the spring we put up our a few signs to sort of explain about pollinator gardens. We did try an event this year in June. We were planting we'd purchased quite a few native plants, and we were ready to plant them, but unfortunately it rained too much that day. But we planted them, but we didn't get any kids staying for that, which was understandable because it was a really rainy day. And then in July, our minister at the church was doing a series on justice, of different issues, and so he had a talk on justice for pollinators, and myself and another woman kind of had a conversation with him, and that was interesting because it's kind of spurred some people to be interested in it. Like there was a couple who live in a condo, and they approached us about how they could get their condo board to switch from putting in annuals into their kind of garden that they have for everyone to pollinator. So they kind of followed up with us about that. And then I've always just made sure we have a little new electronic newsletter that goes out. So during the gardening season, I always include something because many people haven't actually come back to the church. Like they are maybe still doing it on Zoom, or people have moved away, but can still participate on Zoom. So we have somebody from out near Calgary, so at least this way they can kind of see how things have changed. And these are just some photos of some of these events. It's the rock painting thing I mentioned, and these are the kids planting what they grew, and that's that Moms on Bloor group. And then the blue sign is, we've got two of these signs out, one on Windermere and one on Mayfield, that just explain about all the different things that you should have in your pollinator garden. And then the yellow sheet was sort of a handout we had available in the garden at one point, trying to, educate people about if they wanted to kind of convert their grass to more of a garden, how they could go about it. And then this is a photo of this was some of that wood chips mulch that we got from the arborist. And so we were doing lasagna gardening and spreading like cardboard and putting this over top. So everyone was helping with that. And then this was part of our presentation that we had for the church. So this is what people like. So we know not everyone lives in a house. So these were some things we just briefly talked about, if you live in an apartment. But we did have, as I say, somebody lived in an apartment, contacted me about what she could plant next spring to try and get some bees and maybe butterflies to her balcony, and then the people in the condo as well. So as I said, I'm just going to finish up with some of the challenges we've had with our garden, and then end on a positive note with some successes. So I'd say probably one of the biggest challenges, and we couldn't really anticipate it this when we applied for the grant, that there would be a global pandemic when we were trying to start. So it's been harder getting volunteers to help with the garden, just because as I said, people have been slow to come back, or they were hesitant to gather or whatever. So that's been a bit of a challenge that we're still dealing with. And another was just how we could keep church members interested in what we were doing and aware of the transformation we've been making, when they haven't all been able to come out. So that's why the newsletter updates have been helpful. And we also did a video, like a little video. We have to do a video for our grant reporting back, and so we posted that on our website, so people can, when they watch the video, they'll get a good idea of it. And then I'd say probably like the most difficult challenge was how to make the garden welcoming to everyone, while I just put here preserving a sort of a sense of order. But when we and I just retired in May of 2021, and so now I was going to the church, during the mornings and during the week, when previously I wasn't able to do that. So I was really seeing like all these people coming to the church and in and out, and strollers, and picking up kids and everything. And so I mean, we put in these stepping stones that these little girls in their ballet outfits are walking on, and this has been because we were trying to direct people like to walk on this pathway, and it's actually, that has worked out really well, because I see kids in the daycare when they're being dropped off in the morning, they all want to like run on these stones before they go inside. But we had a lot of problems with people like not really picking things, but kind of stepping on things, or wasn't exactly what we had in mind when we were trying to make our garden. So I did find when we like put the wavy, when we use that sort of black plastic to shape the gardens, so I think once we made it look like it was clear where the beds were, and I think when people really saw, like they've watched over the last year, the transformation. So I think, and they've kind of got now that they should not be like moving the sticks every time they come in or whatever. So, but it has been a little, that was kind of a problem we had. And I think also, like, we have a few of these stumps here, and then like on the other side where I don't have a picture, but we that's where we convert it. It used to be all grass. And I saw last summer, like there's a lot of day camps that use the land, and the kids would sit out there and eat their lunches and whatever. And now it's not as fun to sit on the kind of wood chips. So we are looking to try and see if we can get some like stumps that would be more suitable for people to sit on, but we haven't done that yet, or like we just haven't found it. And then just the last point is around sustainability. So how to just how to keep things going, like our the grant will be used up, but I think we should still be fine. Like the plants will be there, but just having more people to help out would be great. And then here's just some of our successes. So the Windermere United Church gardens have become a source of pride for the church, and we've had people contribute to its success in different ways, whether like donating things or helping out. The old wire fences that were there previously were removed, and it's really opened the church up to become more welcoming. And those bell box murals have really added beauty to the whole lawn there. Neighbors have really appreciated what we've done. And we've also had some of our neighbors been planting native species in their own gardens. So we've actually created a bit of a pollinator pathway And the gardens are attracting bees, butterflies, and moths. I don't know if you can see in the photo there, but there's actually a caterpillar there. That's I think it's going to be a black swallowtail butterfly. So we've seen that, we've really moved from just a garden that was just some grass and like wouldn't attract anything to now every time you go there, you'll see bees or butterflies or anything. And so that's it. So thank you very much. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I'll just stop my sharing now.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you very much. For this presentation and for your role in this. And so that's going to be my opening question. And I do offer the chance for people to put questions in the chat or just react in a way that we can unmute you if you would like to ask a question directly. But my first one is more personal for you or individual, and that is, what's your motivation? And it seems like you've been very critical to this whole launch of the garden and operating it now and probably wanting to see it into the future. So what motivates you to be so involved?
Well, I think just I've attended church all my life. So I guess I am a person of faith in some ways. And so I think like we do have kind of an obligation to, be good stewards of the land. And so I think, seeing how the other church has, been able to make their garden like a giving garden in terms of what they're able to donate to food banks and programs. And I think, now our garden at Windermere is giving in a different way, like it's giving to the pollinator. So it just makes me so happy every time I do spend a lot of time there, but it makes me happy every time I go. And if I see people enjoying it, or, people stop to say how they really liked what we've done. And, just seeing all those bees there, because this summer, like a lot of people have said to me, oh, they haven't seen any bees at all. Or, I said, well, come to Windermere Garden, you'll see them. And I think, people sometimes just are growing the wrong things maybe, so yeah, it's work, but I enjoy it.
You did mention the daylilies and the hostas. Like that's been, for people in Southern Ontario, that's been the aesthetic in so many different gardens. That's what we've gotten used to. It are these environments that have very little biodiversity and don't offer much in terms of host plants for other species, or as you say, you need to have the full components of water and shelter and the areas for insects to nest and all of that. So it is looking at it much more holistically as well, the type of land care and the stewardship, as you mentioned. But it just, another question then would be, what is it that was brought by the partnerships that Toronto has in terms of the community grants? So I guess there's, you said that there are 25 or 30 that were given
when we got it, there were 35. Like, I guess they must have a set budget, and it depends probably how much people were asking for. You could get a maximum of $5,000 for your project.
Well, and how much is that also a networking opportunity for these groups that are doing this? And is there a way that they're also trying to map this all out so that it is geographically known where these spaces are? And as you said, corridors are really important for pollinators to have connectivity between these green spaces.
Yeah, I think like, so when the next thing I have to do is really like finish the reporting back to the grant. But I don't like, so they're collecting information on how much like the size of your gardens that you created. I'm not sure if they have a map. Like, I have never seen that, but I participated in other, like there's some other networks like you mentioned. So there's a project Swallowtail in the west end of Toronto, and they are doing a mapping exercise. And there's the David Suzuki Butterfly Way project. That's a national initiative, and they have a map of where these gardens are. So I think I'll have to ask the city, but I think probably because now they've had 3 rounds of funding that have gone out. So I think they, as part of like showing their pollinator protection strategies working, it would be really helpful for them to be able to show or like quantify where, what they funded and where. So thank you.
You have a couple comments in the chat that maybe you can see as well, but thanking you for the wonderful example of what a community, I didn't read the whole thing, but that's from Michael. Let me just pull it up.
Yeah, I've got it here. I opened the chat. So yeah, he's asking if there was something I would do differently. Was there something you would do differently if you did this again? I think what would have been good to do, like if we were starting now in a different place with COVID, what I would have tried to do would be to involve the daycare and the Swansea School of Dance people sort of more at the outset when we were planning it. And then we could have like said, because they are interested in the woman who runs the Swansea School of Dance actually brought all those most of those big logs from her farm to here. But I mean, it would have been nice. I think it would have been like helpful to kind of identify what maybe roles, like if there could be some roles for them, or how they could see, like how can we work with the kids in the daycare, like to maybe have them involved a little bit more. So that would be one thing I think it was kind of like in the original plan, but we didn't do it. But I mean, it's not to say we could do that next year. I think, hopefully COVID would be in a different space and we could still, because that would help with the sustainability challenge I talked about. So if we could get people, helping watering or, and I think that was one of the things we did think about with when I was saying how the kids were, not maybe being careful where they were walking and that sort of thing. So I think that was why we were hoping they could help with planting things, because then they sort of will feel more like a bit of an ownership into it. And I think they would take more care of things. So yeah, I think that would be one thing I'd want to do differently.
Well, you mentioned there was some plants that were grown from seed.
Yeah.
And that, as you say, that really drives the interest and the wonder and the amazement that actual things can grow from such a tiny little entity. But also, where else are people in Toronto and community groups like yours procuring plants that are native plants that we know are not cultivars necessarily?
Yeah, so I didn't include it here because I didn't know where people were, but we did have a slide in our church presentation that showed where some of the native plant nurseries are. So there's a big one out in Claremont, which is east of Toronto, but there's also like Loblaws this year. I think even last year they've been selling native plants as well. And I noticed this year Canadian Tire in their nurseries had some native plants. So I think because more people are interested in this, that the people like Loblaws and that are seeing that they need to include these in their in their garden centers. And then I think there's probably if you're interested in it, depending where you live, if you just look into it, I'm sure there's like networks of people like the one we have here, the Project Swallowtail, but I'm sure there's like in other cities will have people that are interested, or if you can find where the David Suzuki projects are. Because one thing I've noticed is people who are interested in native plants, like they love sharing the seeds, or when they've got their things established, they can divide them and share with people. So like probably maybe next year we'll be able to share some of ours, or we could even share some seeds, I think, this year. So yeah, I think it's out there. People are interested, and you just have to kind of look around.
Yeah, and I know the one with Loblaws or here Superstore. It is a partnership, I think, with World Wildlife.
World Wildlife, so,
yeah, which is good in the sense that we know when it has that organization with it, we know that there's the responsibility, hopefully, in terms of how those plants were, or where the seed came from and how they are grown and everything. So yeah, we do have that as well in other parts of the country, I guess, which is helpful. It does show that there's a growing interest in these types of plants and habitats, and the concern we have for lack of habitat for species in our cities. And yeah, as you say, it is kind of making sure that the land, the green spaces that we have are not only for human interest, human needs, but that they serve the purpose of other species as well. And that can only be beneficial to us. As you mentioned, and I fully agree, I get so much satisfaction of seeing what is making use of the plants or the habitat that I've supported too in my local area. It's very
Yeah.
rewarding.
And I think too, like not just plants, but a lot of seed, like I've noticed a lot of seed companies now, like, really reputable ones. Like there's some that are ones in Toronto based, but others that they're also selling native plant seeds as well. So if you, which is depending on your budget, it's more economical if you, grow things from seeds. So that's like another option you could look into as well.
Yeah. Well, another thing that you mentioned, is getting the wood chips. And that was sort of when we were assessing the greener green space criteria. One of it was, how do you reduce the environmental footprint of designing and establishing and caring for a garden? And so that was one way you sort of tapped into local resources. And another one you mentioned on this presentation was the water, the rain barrel, and that helps the rain that actually comes, and it's the best source probably for the plants. So are there any other examples that you can give where you have been considerate of where things come from, how much resources they take sort of in the care? And you gave two good examples.
I know. I understand. Think. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of tried to reuse or like repurpose things, like, as much as we can. I don't know if I can think of any other examples, but yeah, just like the logs and, I think that's partly why we're still trying to find some that we can use like for seeding to try and put around. So, yeah, and I do find, because in the spring there was a lot of trees in Toronto, and I know elsewhere too, came down where there was a lot of wind, windy storms, and so arborists kept seeing them all. They were all around. So I think they generally seem quite happy if they can get rid of the wood chips to people that are using a garden. And there's actually another one of the other Toronto PollinateTO projects it's not too far from our garden. They got a big load of wood chips, and they still have a lot there. So we asked if we could come and take some, and they were more than happy for us too, because they still have some in their church parking lot. So that was nice. So I think, just finding out where other people, like last year we went on a garden tour of somebody who's like got a big, like he's living in the home that his parents had lived in, and they both died, but he's like changed their garden from, like you said, their more traditional things to native plants. And at the end of the tour, like he gave everyone, you could choose a native plant, because he was also, like, they call it seed sitters, like those people that watch the seeds over the winter. So he had like rafts of plants that he'd grown over the winter. So yeah, so we find out things about that, like and the city of Toronto, actually, for the grant recipients, they've been really, I don't know where they get them from, but they've asked us every year, like if they've sent around an order form for some native shrubs and trees. So, depending how big your project is, you can order, things through there. So that's probably like through some partnership that they have. And when we did purchase some shrubs, I got them through LEAF, which is I don't know, I forget what their acronym stands for, but I think one of their projects was one of your green spaces. And so they had like edible bundles, or like the different ones, small yard bundles. So I got 4 or 5 from there last fall, and they were pretty small when they came, but they've all wintered over, and they're really beautiful. Like we put a pussy willow in the rain garden, and we have like a elderberry and chokecherry. And so I think when you order from a place like that, it's going to be good quality, and it's also supporting the organization.
Yeah, yes. And you're right. LEAF has demonstration gardens that are at Toronto subway stops. And
Right.
yes, they're trying to demonstrate what's possible using native plants in a very sort of layered way, with ground cover and up shrubs and lower, smaller trees, but just the importance of that kind of habitat for and what was once very common in Toronto, but how to reestablish it again. So yes, they are another 2021 greener green space to look up on our website. But our time has run out for today. But yeah, I want to thank you very much. This presentation will be on Sol's website, and you can find the whole list. We've had over 30 now in this Year of the Ecological Garden webinar series. So I welcome and invite everybody to go to Sol's website to find the recordings for this series. And thank you very much for, this is the second last presentation in the summer months featuring 2021 Greener Green Spaces. And I encourage you to renew the application for 2022. And we look forward to receiving that and the updates. But thank you very much, Christine, for today's
You're
presentation.
welcome. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.